All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of our post race show. We had a great race today. Arguably, in my opinion, the best race of the season so far. Now, I want to know what your thoughts on that are. I made a poll in the chat where you can let me know if you thought that this Grand Prix, so the Japanese Grand Prix, was the best Grand Prix of the season so far. And okay, maybe as a Ferrari fan myself, I would argue that the last Grand Prix, where we had Carlos Sainz taking the victory, was the best one from a Ferrari standpoint. But if we're taking aside the fact that Max had a great race and he was dominant, we had a lot of great things happen throughout this race. It was a lot of overtaking, a lot of great battles, different strategies. I mean, I don't even remember the last time we had so many different strategies throughout a race. So I personally believe it was one of the best races of the season. We haven't had many yet, but so far this tops it for me. I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the chat over on the side. You can vote on that poll if I'm still live while doing this. If not, leave a comment. Let me know if you thought this was the best GP of the race. Now, we're going to break down every driver and their performance. It's not going to be a super long one. Again, maybe we'll have some of you guys in here answer some questions if we get any. If not, we'll just go through the drivers and their performances overall, the race pace, and what we thought of each team and where we think they'll be standing when the next Grand Prix, the Chinese Grand Prix, comes in 2 weeks. So let's start off with our bottom finishers, which were Alex Albon and Daniel Ricciardo. Now, this is tough for Alex Albon, and I'm sure it's not what he would have liked to have happen because, as we know, we've had this whole drama within that Williams team about how, he's the most capable of scoring points for the team. They gave him Logan Sargent's car in the last GP. And again, we had this whole discussion of him getting to keep the chassis for this GP compared to the repaired one for Logan. This isn't what he needed. I mean, he got through. I don't know if they did complete sector one, but it was right at the beginning. He makes contact with Daniel Ricciardo. You could argue that he had space. He was going for an aggressive move. Doesn't really matter how we put it. The fact of the matter remains that he didn't even finish a lap. That's no points. That's more damage for that car that cannot take any more damage. And I think I tweeted this out as well. Those mechanics in that Williams garage better be getting some type of bonus because it is crazy to think about the fact that they've been putting in so much work repairing cars for both drivers, not just one. It hasn't been just Logan Sargent this year. It's both drivers having to put in work because they have both made mistakes and they have both caused substantial damage to that car. On the other hand, in 19th, which really, I don't know how they classify who finishes in last and who finishes in 19th if they both knock each other out. I guess it's just based on where their position was before the incident, which in this case, Daniel Ricciardo was still ahead of Alex Albon technically when they did collide. So Daniel Ricciardo ends up finishing 19th. And I love how the cameraman, they pan to Daniel Ricciardo on the side, watching the screens, and then they zoom out and you see Liam Lawson right behind him. So he's lurking in the background. He's ready, and I don't know how much longer Daniel Ricciardo will have his chance. As we know, I recently made a video on this as well. I do think Daniel Ricciardo's F1 career is done or very close to being finished. It's not good for him. It's not a good result for the team when his teammate did great at his home race, but we'll get into that. But for Daniel Ricciardo himself, this is not what he needed, and it's not what the team needs going forward. It was an avoidable mistake. You could chop it down to a racing incident, which is what I would probably do, but you can clearly see that he isn't really checking his right side. And Alex Albon was going for an aggressive move, but there could have been some space given there. I'm sure this was avoidable in a sense. It was avoidable, and it's not helping Daniel Ricciardo in any way towards his bid, basically, to keep this seat and hopefully more next season. So disappointing race for both Albon and Ricciardo, bottom finishers. Then we have Zhou Guanyu, who I personally thought he was going to be doing much better this race. As we do know, the next race, the Chinese Grand Prix, is his home Grand Prix, and it is the first time he will ever be racing at his home Grand Prix. So I thought he was going to use this weekend as a sort of confidence builder. He was going to, just feel it out, build up his confidence, and be able to maximize the car performance in the next race. Now, we know that one of the main issues for the Kick Sauber team is their pit stops, and they once again showed that there are issues with that car. Now, he had to retire the car, I think, after 12 laps or however many it was. I don't remember. I think it was a gearbox issue. I can't quite recall. But either way, he had pitted beforehand. He was in the pits for a while. They were just changing the wing. They were doing a whole bunch of work on the car. It didn't look like he was going to be making substantial moves, but I'm sure he would have liked to at least be battling some other guys up ahead and trying, maybe not necessarily for the points, but just competing. Because another do not finish at the back, it's not what you like to see. So a disappointing race from Zhou Guanyu, but again, not really his fault. This one's more on the car performance than on the driver himself. Next up in 17th, which was the last place driver to actually finish the race, Logan Sargent. Now, as sad or as strange as this might sound, he finished higher up than I would have imagined because I had him finishing 19th or 20th, as I do in most races now. But in a sense, he got lucky that other drivers didn't finish the race, which meant that he has a higher placement than he otherwise maybe would have had. He was actually running a pretty solid race for, I think, the first 2/3 of the race. And I was even tweeting at one point that he was cooking because he was close to the points and he was making some solid overtakes for quite a while. But as we got towards the end of, I think, his penultimate stint, he runs off the track into the gravel, and he actually made a pretty risky reversal back onto the track, which caused yellow flags. Luckily, nothing happened. I know Alonso had to do some evasive maneuvers at the end there. It wasn't too risky, but I'm sure it wasn't the safest way to re-enter a track. Overall, it's not even disappointing because we've come to expect it from Logan Sargent. So I do think that he needs to do better because I think his seat is in jeopardy as well. We always joke about how bad Latifi was, but at the end of the day, Logan Sargent's no better, and Latifi was at least getting some points. So I don't know why they are keeping him. I mean, I have my theories. We all have theories about him being an American driver, him bringing the sponsorships. I read somewhere, I saw somebody tweet out that uh, Logan Sargent is basically Latifi with better marketing. And they're absolutely right because he isn't performing and he isn't showing performance. So if he doesn't quickly pick it up, I think he's in the exact same boat as Daniel Ricciardo, and his seat is at risk next year as well. In 16th and 15th, we had the two Alpine drivers. 16th, we had Pierre Gasly, and 15th, we had Esteban Ocon. Now, we know that this team is struggling. There's no secret about this. They've made this very public. They're complaining quite often. Esteban Ocon has been qualifying quite well. Yesterday, during the last qualifying session, he did manage to get out of Q1 again. So that's 2 races in a row where he has gotten out of Q1 into Q2. He has out-qualified Pierre Gasly at all 4 of the races so far. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because their race pace isn't there. Esteban Ocon came onto the radio right after the first restart, so the second start of the race, and said that he had some contact with Pierre Gasly. On the replay, to me personally, it just looked like a little bit of a tap, nothing too serious. I don't think that's what caused them to perform so poorly throughout the race. I think it's generally that car does not have the pace and it is not quick enough to actually challenge anybody at the moment. Now, I do hope that they fix this because they shouldn't be this far down the field. I mean, they were much more competitive last year, and this is a huge drop-off compared to last year. Only time will tell if this can actually repair itself, and I do think it will repair itself. I think given enough time, they will manage to iron out these issues that they're having with the car. But until then, this looks like it's generally their pace. They're at the bottom of the field. I think Logan Sargent probably would have been ahead of them as well had he not made those mistakes at the end. And yeah, 15th, 16th, but I think in all honesty, if all drivers would have completed this race, they'd probably be further down the order, which is unfortunate, but at the moment, that's just their reality. Next up, we have Valtteri Bottas in 14th position, who, again, he has been on the losing end of some pretty bad pit stops in the past couple races, and this race was no different. There was one point when he was fighting for 10th position, actually, against Yuki Tsunoda, and 5 cars went to pit at once. Although he was leading Yuki Tsunoda, he came out behind these other cars because his pit stop just wasn't as quick as these other cars were. Now, they have improved, of course. I mean, 4 seconds is lightning quick compared to their previous 50-second stops, but this is a race where clearly the pit stop made all the difference between getting points potentially and losing out on the points. So from his end, he had a good race. He had solid overtakes. He was competitive, but the team all-around game is just not there yet for the Sauber team. Obviously, they're still working to improve this. They say that they only have these issues in the race pace because the car gets too hot, the bullets get bolted on it, the temperature's too high, and they just can't seem to take them off. I don't know how they're going to fix this, but I do know that they need to fix this because it's a shame to be losing out on potential points, important points for a team like Sauber, just because they're making these mundane errors that other teams have locked down and they're on top of it. So Sauber just needs to really focus on this and get this together. But overall, it was a solid race from Bottas. He probably would have finished higher up. This is just an unfortunate circumstance of the team. They should be able to fix this. And at the beginning of the season, we didn't think this would be a huge issue for them, but looking like it is an issue for them, and we'll see how they respond in the next race. If they do clean up their act, I think a couple points here and there are inevitable, and I would love, love, love to see Zhou Guanyu score at least a point in his first ever home Grand Prix. So that will be my, not a hot take because I don't know if it will happen, but my desired take for the next Chinese Grand Prix for the next race weekend would be to see Zhou Guanyu get a point at home, squeeze into the top 10. In 13th position, we had Kevin Magnussen. Now, Kevin Magnussen is generally qualifying below his teammate. I mean, it's kind of become a habit that Nico Hülkenberg is very quick in the qualifying sessions, which gives him a much higher starting position. And last year, this was an issue because the Haas team and the Haas cars would quickly drop down the order, but they seem to have gotten much better at this aspect and are better in race pace. So Kevin Magnussen finishing in 13th is a pretty decent result. I mean, it's not, I wasn't expecting him to go in the points. He isn't too far outside the points given who is ahead of him. Overall, a solid race for Magnussen. Didn't have too much happening to him, but we did enjoy watching a couple of battles here and there. I think it's a solid result for him. Obviously, they'll be wanting to get into the points. They have downplayed their success so far this season, and rightfully so, because they still need to improve. They are still considered one of the backmarker teams, but a lower end team. So they'll be happy that they managed to steal some points at the beginning of the season, but they still have a lot of work to do, and they are working on it. So I think being close to the points where if something were to happen, they would get the right safety car at the right time. They could maybe sneak into those points at any given moment. This is what they would like to, where they would like to be if they can't be in the points. So solid race for Magnussen in 13th. In 12th position, we had Lance Stroll. Now, I don't even know what to think about this one. That Aston Martin car should be in the points. And in a sense, we should almost be thanking Lance Stroll because solely due to him, we even have this discussion of who will be stealing a point from the bottom teams. Because our top 5 when it comes to teams, it's pretty clear. I mean, we have our Red Bulls, then our Ferraris, our McLarens, our Aston Martins in theory, and then the Mercedes teams. This has been their traditional order that they've gone basically drawn themselves towards in this season. And the only person that isn't following suit right now is Lance Stroll. Now, he did qualify in 16th, I believe, so he made a couple positions. And at one point, he came onto the radio complaining that he wasn't even complaining. He was almost crying on the radio about their top speed in the straights and how it's a different category engine. So I personally think that his father is already on the phone contacting other manufacturers, getting ready to buy Lance Stroll the engine he requires to make him a world champion. Because if that's the only thing that's missing, hey, I'm all for it. But I don't think that's the case. Traditionally, he hasn't been great here at Suzuka. The car can do much better than where he ended up placing it. He should be ahead of the cars in front of him, but that wasn't the case. So overall, not a great race for Lance Stroll, although he did make up a couple positions. He shouldn't have been in that position to start with. I don't have anything else to add to Lance Stroll. He needs to up his game, although I don't think his seat is quite as at risk as Daniel Ricciardo or Logan Sargent, because again, it's his dad's team, and you can't fault his father for wanting to have his son on his team, right? I mean, any of us would do the exact same thing. But from a driver standpoint, from a performance standpoint, he needs to step it up, period. 11th place, just outside of the points, we have Nico Hülkenberg. Nico Hülkenberg, again, had a great qualifying session yesterday, and he was very close to the points, just one position outside of the points. Like I mentioned with Kevin Magnussen, the other Haas car, if they are swarming right outside of the points, ready to pounce on any mistake, that is all they can hope for if they're not within the points themselves. Great race. We can see clearly that the work they have done on their tire degradation over the break has improved their race pace and their ability to withstand longer stints much, much better, which is, again, making them much more competitive and giving them chances to fight for these points. Lance Stroll overtook Hülkenberg towards the end at some point when he was complaining about the pace of the top speed of the car, but then Nico Hülkenberg, on a fresher set of tires, retook the position. Now, he wasn't necessarily too close to Yuki Tsunoda, but still, an 11th place finish is a solid result for Hülkenberg, and I do think this will be a good sign for the team moving forward, knowing that they're so close to more potential points. This is where they want to be. It's good. It's a solid sign, solid weekend for the Haas team. Now we get into the points-paying positions. This is where things get interesting. In 10th position, we have Yuki Tsunoda, the hometown hero. His Japanese Grand Prix is the home Grand Prix for him, and he delivered. He was putting on moves in those S's at Spoon. I don't know how he was doing it, but he was going for it. He was determined to score a point today, and that is what he did. He gave that crowd something extra special to cheer about. Good for him. Great race. He started in P10, so he didn't improve, but he didn't do any worse. And he, on the restart and on the main start, he didn't have a great start. So the fact that he was able to fight back, he had a solid pit stop. So good that he even thanked the team for the solid pit stop on the radio. Very wholesome moment from Yuki Tsunoda, because we're used to him coming on the radio and complaining about something. But he was locked in today. There was no way he could have done better than he did today. Great overall race. Great result. Happy for Yuki. Happy for the fans. They deserve this. And he's silently becoming a teammate killer over there at the Racing Bulls team. I mean, he's dispensing of every teammate he's had under the radar. He's not being scouted by any top teams yet. But, if he keeps performing like this, some teams surely may come calling. In 9th position, we have 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, who, disappointing day for him. I don't know. I'm not going to get too aggressive against Hamilton today, but I don't think he was happy with his performance. I don't think he was happy with the strategy. I didn't understand why he offered to let Russell just go by him early on in the race. Maybe he thought they were on different strategies. At the end of the day, they weren't really on different strategies. But he wasn't too quick. He didn't have much pace in that car. I thought he would finish a little bit higher because he seemed solid yesterday in the qualifying session. That Mercedes car looked good. Total Wolff said that they got some great data points and they'll be much stronger next race, which is fair. A pretty mediocre race for Hamilton. I'm sure he would have liked more. He seemed a bit deflated. He demanded that the team change strategy at one point because he wasn't happy with it. It is what it is. Overall, at least he got some points. Would have liked more, and I'm sure he'll be aiming for more next race as well. In 8th position, we have Oscar Piastri, who just had his 23rd birthday yesterday. So, Oscar, if you're watching this for whatever reason, happy birthday. Hope you enjoyed. He did, however, not have the greatest race of his life. He dropped down 2 positions. I think he started the race in 6th place and finished in 8th. He did have a battle with Alonso at the end for that 6th position. before Russell caught up from behind, tried some type of dive bomb move. It was okay at the end. It was pretty clean. He cut a bit of the corner, no penalties, just hard driving. Overall, it's fine. Um, yeah, not much to add to Oscar Piastri. Didn't have great pace compared to the race he had here last year. I'm sure he would want more, and he'll be fighting for more next race. But that car is looking good. I'm sure Oscar will be bouncing back pretty quickly into higher points paying positions. In seventh place, we have the other Mercedes driver, George Russell. Now, George Russell is another driver who actually had a pretty solid day. He started down lower in the field. This was the first time he was out-qualified by Hamilton this season. But at the end of the day, it didn't really matter because, like I said, Hamilton just offered to let him by early on. And he was fighting. He fought for some positions, and he basically swapped overall finishing positions with Lewis Hamilton from where they started the race. A decent race for George Russell, nothing too crazy. I'm sure this is good for his confidence after the last race he had in Australia. The little fight with Oscar Piastri at the end, I'm all for it. I'm happy that he's not backing out of these fights and he is going for it. He was on fresher tires, so it made sense as well to fight and attack for that position. And he pulled off the move. He didn't have time to go on and attack Alonso. That would have been great to see, especially after the last race. Unfortunate. If we would have had maybe 1, 2, 3 more laps, that would have been a great battle to see. And I would have enjoyed watching that as well. Overall, great race for George Russell. Solid points for Mercedes. I think for him, as long as he's outperforming Lewis Hamilton in the same car, he's not going to be too upset about his results. In sixth position, we have Fernando Alonso with the Aston Martin, which is such a huge contrast compared to Lance Stroll, who finished so far down the order. But Alonso doesn't care. I mean, he will fight for any single spot he can. He was doing the Carlos Sainz Singapore strategy, giving Oscar DRS to be able to defend against Russell for a couple laps, knowing that if Russell were to get by Piastri, then he would be attacking him afterwards. So smart moves, smart strategy. I mean, if Stroll is complaining about this top speed, the straight line speed, I'm willing to guarantee that Alonso's having the exact same issues, except he is able to pull out these higher point paying positions with that Aston Martin car, which I think the true pace of the car is somewhere probably between Alonso and Stroll, because Alonso can obviously extract more from the car, whereas Stroll probably isn't extracting everything that he could from the car. But a sixth place finish for Fernando Alonso in a race like this today, that's all you can ask for. I mean, you only have one McLaren in front of you, so you held off the other. Both Mercedes are behind you, and the top 4 you can't argue about or compete with. Great race for Fernando Alonso. Sorry. I'm sure he would like to see more and get higher up, but given the circumstances, I am sure he is happy, and he will be going forward just like this. Great to see. In fifth position, we have Lando Norris, who may just be a little bit disappointed with his performance today. He started the race off in third position, right on the second row, and he ended up in fifth, which meant he dropped down 2 places in a race where his car was pacey. I mean, he was quick, so this, in my opinion, comes down more to strategy than anything else. He didn't make any great mistakes. He was quick. He had fastest lap at one point on the hard tires. I think he just should have extended that hard tire stint or his first stint, because he tried to undercut or avoid the undercut from Carlos Sainz at the beginning, and then from George Russell at the end of the second stint. They were more focused on fighting off against other drivers, attacking them, than attacking themselves, which I think hurt them in the long run. Now, a fifth place finish is solid for Lando Norris, but I'm sure he could have and should have and would have liked to have a higher position here. We'll see how the McLaren drivers react and come back in China. and how their pace is overall there, because we haven't raced in China for 5 years now, I think. So it's going to be quite interesting, especially with it being a sprint weekend, to see how those cars react. They'll have one free practice session, and then they're in that sprint race. That's going to be interesting to see. Next up, we get into our top four. In fourth position, we have my personal favorite, Charles Leclerc. And Charles, he was disappointed with his result in the moment, but realistically, I think he had a great race. I am so impressed that Ferrari managed to pull out a top strategy for once in 10, 20, 15 years. I don't know how long, but great race strategy for Leclerc. He extended that first medium stint all the way to cut down his race from a two-stop to a one-stop, which made him jump quite a couple positions. He was fighting Norris directly. He got Norris right at the start when they came out of the pits there after their stop together. And he also overtook Bottas, I think, or whichever driver was, it might not have been Bottas, it might have been Russell, right at the beginning to ensure that he had that gap between him and Norris. And from there, he just got out of the slipstream, out of the DRS zone, and it was his. I mean, he was in second position at one point. Obviously, we had Perez coming in, quick car. Well, he was in first at one point. He had Max passing, Perez passing, and then Carlos Sainz, which probably stings a little bit, but it makes sense. It makes sense given the different strategies they were on. Leclerc salvaged huge positions, I think 4 positions throughout the course of the race, which I personally wasn't expecting. So this is a pleasant surprise as a Ferrari fan today from Leclerc's side of the garage, which we aren't used to seeing. Good job, Ferrari. Good job, Leclerc. Driver of the day. Happy to see. Solid race. In third position, our podium spots, we have Carlos Sainz, who started in fourth. He has been on the podium every race of this season where he has raced. Keep in mind, he didn't race in Jeddah due to the appendicitis. Solid race. Great strategy. He was doing his thing again, being his own strategist, making calls in the car. Obviously, it stung 5% stinging to see him overtake Charles Leclerc, and also having the team say that Leclerc shouldn't be focused on fighting him. So they basically didn't do any team orders, which is fine, I guess. I would just like to... I mean, it's fine because I know if they would have fought, Carlos Sainz would have overtaken Leclerc anyways. And Leclerc didn't just let him by. He did put up a bit of a defense. Obviously, too little. Fresher tires for Carlos Sainz. So overall, I'm okay with the decision. But I do think it would have been fair then to let them fight in Australia at the beginning. But that's a whole different story, and we're not going to get into that one. However, great race for Carlos Sainz. Strong overtakes. Spoon, he was doing some nice overtakes. He was on it today. He's been on it all season, actually, so I'm not just going to boil it down to today. He's gotten great at qualifying, great race pace, and he is selling himself for a strong seat next year. So somebody better give him a seat next year. And I'm not talking about some Sauber seat. I want a strong seat for Carlos Sainz next year because that is what he deserves. In second position, we had the 1-2 from Red Bull, second place, going to Sergio Perez. Probably won't come as a shock. Perez has really upped his game this year. And I know for him personally, he would like to see or like to say that his main goal is to fight for a championship. Now, you may agree, you may not agree. Max Verstappen's in a league of his own. And as long as they do have that same car, I think just Max is just so much quicker that Perez has no chance of catching him directly with the same strategy, with the same machinery, with whatever you want to call it. But Perez, who's also out of a seat next year, essentially, is also making his case because if I'm Red Bull, yeah, last year they might not have been happy with the way he has been performing, but this year, what more can you ask of Perez? Take out, again, the Australian Grand Prix where Perez underperformed, but Max's do not finish kind of covered that up a little bit because it didn't look so night and day between the two. He's gotten second position in 3 of the 4 races, which is exactly what Red Bull can want from him. I mean, they don't want somebody to completely challenge Max, but they want somebody to be getting them as many points as they can which second position is ideal without the risk of the two drivers hitting each other. This is exactly what they want from Perez. Perez had a nice 8-second gap to Carlos Sainz as well. Sure, he had 12 seconds gap to Max, but he seemed very strong in qualifying. His race pace isn't quite there with Max yet. However, I'm sure he'll be happy with this. Although he will be saying he wanted more, he'll be happy with this. The team will be happy with this. It's a great result for him now and a result for him in his future as well. So, solid race from Sergio Perez. And in first position, of course, we have none other than Max Verstappen himself. Now, this isn't going to come as a shock to anybody. I mean, we knew Max would come out hungry after the issue he had in Australia. Surprisingly, the gap between Max and second place wasn't as massive as it had been in the previous years here in Japan, but that doesn't really matter because he still got fastest lap. He still got first position. He still had a 12-second gap. Basically a flawless race for Max Verstappen. He'll be happy with it. I know he got to celebrate with P after the race, so she got to see him win a race as well. Great race for Max, great race for the team, because it sort of is a home race for Red Bull as well with the Honda engines and the Honda connection. The fans are happy when Max wins, so it's a wholesome moment overall. I'm happy Max did get a dominant win here. The team deserves it, and Max deserves it, because if you're this great and this quick at a track, you do deserve this outcome. So that's all of the drivers. The teams, they're basically slot themselves into their performance. I mean, this is what you expect, right? I already mentioned the top 5. The other teams are still fighting for those lower positions, but right now it seems like a clear-cut Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, Mercedes. These might change throughout the course of the season. I don't know. I would like to hope and think that we will get a closer battle between the Ferraris and the Red Bulls, at least as the season progresses, but there's no way to guarantee this yet. We will see what happens in China. That is a place where none of these teams will have any data with these new regulations, these new cars. So there could be something happen there. I don't know. We'll see. Lewis K, thank you for the comment. After Japan, you think Ricciardo is going to be dropped for Lawson soon? I think even before Japan, Ricciardo is going to be dropped for Lawson soon. I think, and again, I have nothing against Ricciardo. I think he used to be a phenomenal driver. I love him as a personality and as a guy, and I think he's great to have in the paddock. I think at most, maybe the midsummer break. During the summer break, if he hasn't been dropped, that's probably when they will be switching over between the two drivers, so they have some time to get Liam Lawson accustomed as well and set everything up for him. Yeah, I don't think he'll be in that team for much longer. And if they do somehow give him the rest of the year, there's very little chances that he'll be on the grid next year. Very little chances. In Japan, we know what happened. In China, some of my predictions, my crazy prediction, which might be more hopeful than crazy, but I do think something will happen with Max Verstappen again. I don't know what will happen. I'll probably do another post-qualifying live then, and we can do some race predictions after we see some of the pace of the cars themselves throughout the session, because we don't know exactly. Again, like I mentioned, we haven't raced there since 2019, so it's been years and years since we have any sort of solid info or data on the race. But I think it'll be a good race, and I am looking forward to it because it's a pretty fun track, at least in F1. In the game, it's a fun track. I don't know how the drivers feel about it. That first turn is crazy, crazy, crazy. So we will see how that plans out. If you did enjoy this and want to see more live streams like this, I do post a long form video every single week. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. I just posted my previous video, which was actually Ricardo's Career is Over video. That's on my channel. So make sure to subscribe to see when the new videos do drop, because every week there is a new video. Now, the one I have planned for next week is, again, controversial. I don't want to spoil anything yet, but I'm sure some people might not be happy. Some people might agree with me. Some might not be happy. So make sure to subscribe to stay up to date when that one does drop. Let me know what you thought of the race, either in the comments here. Thank you, Lewis. I appreciate it. For a small channel, your content is quality. I do appreciate it. And it's always hard with a small with a small channel, because you're at the beginning and you have no exposure. And obviously, I'm trying to improve as well. So I do appreciate any feedback you guys may have. I'll try to give more time before these lives. So I'll try to post earlier when I do the live so that you guys have time to come in as well. And then we can have more discussions just like this one with you guys involved too, because that makes it easier for me and for you guys when you're posing questions and we're just discussing things over. But again, I do want to thank everybody, ask everybody to subscribe again, and see you guys next week. Bye.